Okay.
Okay, so my name's Tchiki, as you know, and I'll be talking about the research foundations for developing online wellness tools and interventions. But before I begin, I want to tell you a story about Sally. So Sally was raised by a loving but single mother, and so oftentimes they had financial difficulties. For example, one time they couldn't afford brakes for the family car, and they went barreling through a fence on a country road. Other times, they couldn't afford food, and they had to go to the church to pick up food for the week. So as you can imagine, these things would be difficult for any child to experience. But Sally didn't actually view them as difficult. And currently, 1 in 5 adolescents will develop an emotional health disorder. But Sally's ability to see these events as positive prevented her from being one of those kids. And so I'm curious how people like Sally reinterpret these negative events as positive, and how we teach other people to reinterpret the negative events in their lives as positive. So this is what I've been aiming to do over the last few years at Berkeley in the psychology department. And in particular, I've been focusing on understanding emotion, how emotion contributes to improved mental health and well-being, and how we develop technologies to change people's emotional processes to improve their well-being. And I've been trying to do this with the support of the National Institute of Mental Health and other organizations on Berkeley campus. But today I'm going to zoom in a little bit and talk about the different ways that we can develop online interventions that are more effective. And first I'm going to start by talking about what wellness interventions are and why we need them, what the current standards are for intervention development and assessment, and then how we create wellness interventions that are actually effective in applied settings. And this is all pretty short, so then I'll open it up to discussion and then we can just chat. So first let's talk about what wellness interventions are and why we need them. So wellness interventions tend to focus on increasing positive emotion, whereas other interventions often focus on decreasing negative emotion. So most traditional psychotherapies teach people the skills they need in order to decrease their negative emotions so that they don't feel as bad. But positive and wellness interventions focus on teaching people the skills they need to increase positive emotions. So these interventions teach people things like paying attention to positive material, capitalizing on positive events, for example, by savoring, sharing, or writing down. They also teach people how to positively reappraise events and to practice gratitude. So these are just some of the ways that wellness interventions teach people how to increase their positive emotion. So why would we need this? As you all know, we all experience stressful events in our lives. We might break up with a serious romantic partner, we might lose our job, or in the case of many of the students at Cal, we get this great offer and opportunity to go to Cal, but you have to move all the way across the country, which is great, but also quite stressful. And it's totally normal for people to experience a dip in well-being in response to these normal stressful events. And many people just gradually recover across time and return to their emotional baseline. Other people, however, without the adequate emotional coping skills, may go on to develop emotional health issues, even from regular types of stressors. There's also a third group of people who kind of respond to this stress by really thriving. They might bond with other people in their social group, or they might try to learn new things to face these challenges. And we like to think that wellness interventions kind of bring people up into these two groups, so that they're not only not suffering, but they're also thriving. And so the past research has shown that these types of interventions are quite effective in doing both of these things. They decrease negative emotions and symptoms of depression, and even symptoms of physical illness. They also increase happiness, satisfaction with life, and even workplace creativity and success. So, wellness interventions are needed to prevent the development of serious mental health issues, to reduce existing symptoms of mental illness, and to promote well-being and thriving. So next, let's talk about what the current standards are for intervention, development, and assessment. It's really important that online interventions especially assess actual impact versus intent to impact. There's a zillion and one apps out there that try to make people happier, and most of these have good intentions, but we don't actually know if they're helpful in increasing impact. So impact doesn't refer to the number of people the product reaches, the number of people who tell others about the product, or even people who say the product is helpful, although I've heard that people refer to that as impact. Impact refers to the extent to which your product changed some aspect of your user's life. And it's really important to measure that. Another useful thing when developing these types of interventions is to focus on dimensional outcomes versus categorical outcomes. So the example I like to give is depression symptoms versus depression diagnosis. If you're just looking at whether or not someone has a diagnosis of depression or not, it's really hard to predict which category someone falls in. And since people fall kind of all along this continuum of well-being to ill-being, if you're just looking for people on the purple line versus everyone else, that doesn't really leave a lot of variability, and it's really hard to predict that. Another useful thing is to use behavioral measures. So we might use a question like this to determine how socially rejected a person feels. And it's totally fine to use self-report questions like this, but they tend to have a lot of inherent bias. So for example, how a person responds to this question will be biased by how recently they were socially rejected, how intense that experience of social rejection was, or even their emotions at the moment. So instead, or in addition to using questions like these, we also try to use behavioral tasks assessing emotional experience. And this is a commonly used task called cyberball. And it's basically, you're the little hand at the bottom, and you're playing catch with these two other little digital guys, and they're supposed to be represented by other people. And after a while, you notice they're throwing the ball back and forth to each other, and they're leaving you out. And so this has been reliably shown to induce feelings of social rejection. So then, when you ask somebody how socially rejected they feel, they don't have to recall some kind of some experience of being rejected a long time ago, and it's really fresh in their memory, and they're able to respond to it in a much less biased way. So in sum, it's really important to show evidence of impact. We need dimensional measures and behavioral measures, and these things can help us better understand the effect of online interventions and tools. So finally, let's talk about how we actually create wellness interventions that will work in applied settings. We know from research that people will not do kind of wellness interventions or activities if they're too difficult, if they're too long, if they're too boring, even if it requires them to leave the web page. For example, if you tell them to go out into the world and do something good for them, they're less likely to do it than if you have them do something right on the web page. Also, if it doesn't include motivation-enhancing features. For example, if you give people a rationale for why they're doing something, they're more likely to do it. If you teach them how to apply the skills in their real life, they're more likely to do it. Or if you include social proof. For example, by including a picture of someone who benefited from the activity, then they're more likely to do it. And so these are some of the types of issues I've been trying to address in my project LifeNIC, which I'm going to tell you a little bit about. And so with LifeNIC, we tried to make games that grow emotionally healthy kids. And you intuitively know that practicing a skill makes you better at that skill. But most people don't realize the same exact thing is true for emotional skills. So imagine if there were games, just like there are math and science games, where kids could practice thinking about themselves positively or increasing their positive emotion. Then the quality of their entire lives could be improved. So we tried to make a couple of these games to see if this was even possible. And here's an example of one game we made where the dinosaur has to eat all the positive bugs and avoid eating all the negative bugs, or else he'll get sick. And so in this game, when kids eat the positive bugs, they learn sort of different ways to reappraise situations as more positive. And they do this over and over, then they have these experiences kind of readily accessible in their mind. Here's another game we made where you have to click on the smiling face and avoid, or the smiling faces and avoid the non-smiling faces. And this is actually based on a research study that showed that doing this over and over again helps attenuate people or direct people's attention to positive things in their real lives, which is kind of amazing that that worked. So in sum, it's totally possible to transfer research into effective and engaging online wellness tools and interventions. We really just need to balance the scientific evidence with user engagement so that people will actually be willing to do these things. And I think we can do this with games. So that's sort of my thought. And I want to thank you guys for listening to my little talk. And I'm curious what your questions are and what you're all working on, and I hope we can talk about that more. The end.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
Is it possible to have a framework which allows each participant to actually choose the parameters that they want to improve against?
Like one person,
themselves?
like one person wants to improve their social skills, one wants confidence, one wants well-being, or is that what you mean?
Yeah, maybe even a couple of levels under that. I mean, that would perhaps be the metadata, but say within social skills, if it's possible to further classify. Is it possible to look at frameworks like that, or is that just something which?
It is. The thing about these types of interventions is that, or about mental health in general, like we tend to classify like depression is a thing, and anxiety is a thing, and OCD is a thing, but the same types of interventions improve all of the outcomes, and the same types of predictors lead to all those different outcomes. So treating them with something really specific doesn't seem to be any more beneficial than just like giving them a shotgun approach and giving them everything. Does that kind of make sense? So like if I developed a task for social anxiety, it's probably going to work just almost as well for depression or OCD or whatever, which is kind of not intuitive.
I was just trying to, maybe it's wrong what was in my mind. I was just trying to see that engagement might improve if the person is themselves involved
So like
in
doing
the choice.
doing an activity that's like matched to their personality, like somebody would like the smiling being better.
Possibly.
I definitely think that's possible. Somebody at Berkeley in, I think, the iSchool did a study kind of like that, where they did a machine learning algorithm and had people assigned to different wellness activities that I think that they enjoyed the most somehow. But the thing is, everyone ended up getting assigned to pretty much the same thing. It was just like the highest quality intervention. Yeah.
So, I want to ask about sort of this dimensional aspect you referred to in the talk, especially given that a lot of this stuff depends on self-assessment. And I'd love to hear your thoughts about sort of baselining, because the subjective nature of somebody saying I'm depressed versus I'm happy, it's all sort of relative, right? Because it really depends on sort of what that person's baseline, because it would seem like just because I'm happy may not be the same happy as Warren here, right? It's just kind of human nature that there's a subjective aspect because of the self-assessment piece. And I just want to hear more about because it seems like baselining would be super important.
Absolutely. So like I had a slide in there sort of about that last time I gave this talk, but this basically like assessing impact is the extent to which the product changed something. So like in all of my research studies, we assess a baseline because inevitably if somebody starts out like really depressed, like they're going to have greater change, right? So it would be really important, like if you're developing an app, to get some kind of baseline before people even use it to see if it's impacting their outcomes. And there are different ways to do that. Like you can do like a pre-post design. A randomized controlled trial would be the best thing, but that's not always feasible for these online things, because what's your control group going to be? You're going to be like, I will develop a whole separate app for the control group,
yeah,
so it's really tricky.
Yeah, I just would imagine, because even if you do an assessment up front with people, it doesn't necessarily provide that baseline, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I mean, part of even the behavioral measure I talked about is still self-assessed, right? You're still like, I felt this way. I know a lot of people do, there's like this task called the IAT, where you have to like click on things, and it sort of helps assess people's unconscious biases. So maybe something like that would be less prone to be affected by, like, I think I'm depressed, or whatever people are thinking about themselves.
Right.
Yeah.
So what are some other games that you made, your research group has made? You gave 2 examples, are there?
I did. I don't even think I have any pictures of other ones. They weren't very good, to be honest with you, which is probably why this didn't work out. But we did one, which is just like your traditional like memory card game, where you have to flip over the 2 cards and have them match, that were all positive words. And by doing this over and over, it makes those words more accessible in your brain, so you can kind of just like use them more easily in daily life. There are other apps on the market that have developed some kind of interesting games. There's one, I actually have a picture of it in here that I'll show you. If I can find it. So this one, they have little grumpy faces and smiling faces, and they're moving down the screen, and you have to trace the smiling ones with your finger, and supposedly that's helpful. This one's called Uplift. You have to pop the balloons that have the positive words and not the ones that have the negative words. So people are starting to do this kind of stuff. Nobody is assessing the impact, though, so we don't actually know if these work. They're based on research that suggests they should work, but I'm a big fan of assessing impact.
Have you considered that it might be cool to have these games at the Exploratorium? Because then you could have...
What is that?
Oh, in San Francisco, on the pier in Embarcadero, there's a museum called the Exploratorium. I want to say museum lightly, because they have things, for example, that could be bias games. So they'll have you and a partner sit across from each other, take a bunch of cards, put them in, you know, male and career and female and whatever, and then they'll switch sides, female and family, and they'll switch sides and do the same thing for male and family, female and career. And like, how does that? You know,
That's the IAT that I was mentioning.
And so what they basically do there. So when you're at the Exploratorium, there are people walking around that are scientists, and they watch your reactions to do those things.
That would be
That's
awesome.
like not obvious to normal people who are there. But whenever they install a new system, new place, they'll basically have people stand around and like, you know, like pretend to be other museum goers, and kind of watch and be like, did that make a person smile? And what they want is keep, obviously, it's a museum for kids and adults and kids of all ages. And so what they do is try to keep things that are good, but they also run genuine experiments there. And that could be something where all of these things feel like they are very similar to what I see there.
Okay.
And that would be something where I'm sure they would love to work with.
I know, I hear him, because I've seen that, and not just qualitatively, but even quantitatively, because somewhere I remember reading that there were like 15,000 kids every month who walk through that. So
How hard is it to get your work in there?
For this kind of stuff, this seems like it's the same.
Yeah,
it's like this is what they put there.
They'd be interested.
Basically. And it's basically like psych studies that have some demo is basically like how you do it. I mean, Berkeley's a well-renowned, close-by institution. I'm sure if you asked your professor, they might know more about it, or if you literally went to the Exploratorium and you're like, hi, I did my PhD in like literally putting things in your museum. Okay, cool.
There may be Berkeley scientists already involved. So.
Yeah, I mean, I know there's the Berkeley Foundation has donated to on that. I don't know if that's the same. Has the same name.
There are a tech museum in San Jose too that has some.
There is.
I've seen some children's stuff in there sometimes as well. So
in Fremont too.
Right.
I have a question which actually goes to his point, to
Ben.
Ben number two's point.
It could be better.
It's about baselining, and there are lots of standard lexicons which are available for which have been refined over the years. This word means this, and it's supposed to mean this class of feelings, etc. I was very curious if there is a standard, parameterized something for non-lexicons. I hesitate to use the word emoticon because I think this is more than that. But are you
What
aware?
is a lexicon?
In the sense that usually when we're looking for meaning of what something might mean, you need to refer to something standard and run machine learning against that, and then keep refining as you go forward. So there are some standard lexicons available. I was wondering if there's something similar like that which you're aware of for visual stuff, because that would be interesting, right?
I don't know.
Because there's so many apps nowadays which go beyond language. They just use this kind of stuff.
Are you talking about like a database of positive images?
Yeah.
Is that what you... Like-
To start with, yeah. Essentially, to go back to his point about baselining, it's not just numbers, it's also the parameter.
How would you decompose those positive images into features?
Yeah.
You could look at shapes that make you happy,
Right.
like faces are shown to, I guess,
Yeah.
be more recognized. Babies are all like, that box looks like
Yeah.
a face.
There is a database of positive and negative images that have
Right.
all, I think they've all been rated, self-report ratings of their emotion. There's also a database of the words we use in language and their emotional ratings.
Right.
I don't know if that's helpful.
Okay.
And then what you were saying about like shapes, there is some research that shows that people find like soft shapes more positive than jagged shapes,
Right.
Hmm.
Okay.
that kind of stuff.
No, I was just wondering if you'd come across it.
It's so funny, like this divide in understanding between like the computer science. You guys have this different language, and I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm learning though.
I'm wondering, can you do the reverse? Like, if you can play a game that makes you happy, can you make a game that makes the person like more depressed?
Yeah. So
Like
there.
a sad face game or something?
Probably. I know that there's some research on like some traditional fighting game reduces people's empathy, and so kind of the idea is that these types of games help increase positive emotions like empathy, and so by repeatedly shooting some stranger, we no longer like feel as connected to strangers. So certainly games have consequential effects, and that's kind of what got me interested in this is that we know that we can learn things through games. We know we are learning things through games. Why not learn things that are actually useful? I mean, we
Yeah.
learn math and science and basic stuff, but not emotion stuff. So.
Do you think organizations would be interested in this in terms of, employee retention, employee motivation?
I do think so. That's like one of the things I was exploring at one point. I don't know what you guys think, but these games seem pretty boring to me. I would not play them. And so we're basically where we got stuck is figuring out, like, maybe kids would play them or some iteration of them. Yeah, I know, right? They got really good stuff now. And so I don't know how to make this type of material fun enough that people would actually do it either in an organization or for kids.
Yeah, so I've built a lot of games, actually, that's more my background, and a lot of that is more about role-playing and storytelling.
Yeah.
So kids love that sort of assuming a role in sort of the fantasy world, and that's why they know like all the different, things about Dungeons and Dragons, or, pick your genre, World of Warcraft, whatever, but when it comes to actual real stuff, it lacks that role-playing storytelling aspect to it.
Mhm.
And if you can incorporate, that's why you always see Hollywood trying to embellish real stories by adding pieces that seem to fit better as a story. Because a lot of times, I think there's studies that show that the human mind works in terms of storylines, right?
Mhm.
Protagonist, antagonist, hero's journey, that kind of thing. And so I think that's where this kind of falls down, because I think you have the mechanics,
Yeah.
but you don't have the storyline or the overall sort of game. Like you have pieces of it, but you didn't flow it into like an overall thing that people could really get into.
Yeah, absolutely. Like
So-
my psychology background was like, this is the scientifically based way to do this, and it's like one step removed from what's in the journals. But
Okay.
like we need game people to come in and be like, no, this is what people actually like.
Right. It's not enough just to have the mechanics,
Mhm.
That's where a lot of people fall down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, games are hard.
Have you heard of the game 2048?
No.
So it's basically you have a bunch of blocks spawn, like 4 or 5 blocks that some of them have the number 1, some of them have the number 2. If you combine 2 1 blocks, you get a 2. Combine 2 2 blocks, you get a 4.
Yeah.
Combine 2 4 blocks, you get an 8. Your goal is to combine thousands of boxes until you get a box that says 48, which requires you to combine every power of 2 beneath that, log n times.
Mm-hmm.
In order to get that. So there have been lots of it was widely addictive, like terribly so. I lost many a lecture.
Same problem.
And so then after a little while, because it was basically really easy to write And so all these people were like replacing the 2048 numbers with like pictures of Rihanna and like pictures of like whatever, all these like pictures of like game characters or like Pokemon like leveling up, and like it was just a mess. But what if you could take something like a kind of bandwagon approach to, there's this new viral like cheesy, easy to write game that kind of comes out, it seems to happen every couple months, and just like replace all of the sprites with smiley faces.
I mean, we thought about ways to do this with Candy Crush that would work.
Yeah, like smiley crush.
Right? Yeah.
I think it's kind of interesting because there's, with military personnel, they suffer trauma, and what they learned is that you can do resiliency training, so when trauma occurs, that you'll be less susceptible to the negative effects of it. So, for example, in children who get bullied, I wonder if you could utilize some sort of, gaming strategy to where, so when these negative events occur, which happen to some children getting bullied or parent gets divorced, then they're less susceptible to having psychological trauma due to that because there was some sort of resiliency training early on.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and that's the way I tried to pitch this to people, because our brain, most of our emotional brain forms when we're young, and so if we, like as an adult, it's really hard to learn these things and change our emotional responses. But as kids, like if we can get people to start, reacting in ways that are positive, then like their entire lives are going to be different. So for sure, that would be the way to do it. But it's a shame because some of the grants I applied for, they're very treatment oriented. So they're like PTSD, treat that. And I'm like, no, like you want to prevent all these different things. And if you do this prevention, then you can prevent not only PTSD or depression, you can kind of prevent everything, and even like the negative effects of bullying and things that are not so severe. So part of the problem is the field has not caught up to the science and the evidence, and so it's hard to be. Academia, as I'm sure you know, is like not really a proponent of innovation, unfortunately.
Does anybody know why 2048 was so addictive? Like, what do you think?
The theory,
It's just great. I don't know.
the theory is very simple.
It's simple. I think that's
Anything that's easy to do, but it's hard to become a master or become a master at, it's very addictive.
But not
Yeah.
long-term retention, right? Because as soon as you get it a few times,
No.
really?
The
Oh,
game
okay.
doesn't end when you reach 2048.
Okay.
You can do 4098. Or
All
4096.
right.
And you can do
Never ending.
8000.
I have, like from my own life, I have an example with a game called Farmville.
Yeah.
Right? So at some point, so like I had a bunch of friends in the early 30s, and for some reason they, many of them started playing this stupid game, and I resisted for a while, and then I kind of, after a while, I just decided to try to figure out what is it about this game that brings this kind of people to play it. So before I did that experiment, I noticed something very interesting. So among my friends who were going through a tough period in their life, or their life was a mess, or like some kind of seemingly insurmountable problem, or like no money, or like bad marriage or something. So they had the most fancy farms, cities, like which eventually turned into like cities or something. The most like invested. The other ones who were doing okay, that they like had very mediocre, like small kind of cities. So, and then when I tried it, so what I noticed is that basically it's you sow some seeds and then something grows and you collect and you get money for it. But the deal was that the animations were so cute and the sounds were so cute and the money pouring out of whatever you did right was so it was nice sound effects. So you suddenly had a feeling that here now you are accomplishing something. So no matter what is wrong in your life otherwise, this is the place to do something right, to accomplish something, and as I understand, like accomplishing something is one of the basic human source of pleasure. So besides eating and like avoiding pain and all the other stuff, accomplishing something is something that gives you pleasure. And this game gave you like positive reinforcement with the cute animations. And I think basically if you had the same game, exactly the same game, but like very basic graphics and very basic sounds, it would not be catching on, because you need to see kind of the accomplishment that you get. You see something invested by other people, so you need to really believe that it's a positive reinforcement. And so, like for my friends who their life was in ruins, kind of, they felt that this is the place that they can actually believe that they can do something right. And this was kind of the like many years before this game, there was a series of games called quests. So now they evolved into RPGs, I think. But then was like Space Quest. If you know what I'm talking about, there was King's Quest, Space Quest, Police Quest. So basically, it's a series of screens, series of rooms. You go from like you need to resolve some problem. You need to find this object and apply it to that object, and then if you do it right, something happens. So basically, it was difficult riddles, and you ended up trying every object on every object, and sometimes you say, no, you can't use this hammer on this glass, what you face or something. And it was funny. And then when you eventually did something right, there was some kind of short animation. And you saw that before you spent half an hour working back and forth, and now you got something, and this animation was your reward. And this kind of what brought people and kept them to continue playing. So
it's the positive reinforcement. Right?
Yeah. So
I was talking to a woman who worked at Harmonix for Guitar Hero, and they developed like the crowd cheering more and more when you're playing the guitar better,
Yeah.
and found that is like the best reinforcement, because it's not only like a little reward, it's like gives you that sense of social reward.
right, and
you
sound of
actually-
people clapping, for example,
Right.
it's very powerful for some reason.
I've never played Guitar Hero, but apparently that got a lot of people very hooked on that game.
Yeah, so you need to have a successful game, you need to have a good balance between the effort you put in, so it would not be too easy, not be too hard, too frustrating, and then get the reward. And so these games kind of follow that path. The outlier being Flappy Bird, which there was no reason for. But I think one of the smart things they did is when you die in a Flappy Bird, so you die in a funny way, it kind of goes down, but they could have made it that once you die, the next level, like the next attempt, starts immediately. And it was always kind of frustrating me that I have to wait for this score to come up, and I have to push again. But then I figured out if it did start immediately, then I would try it like several times and then let it go. But it was kind of so annoying, so that you have to wait. So that played a big part. So there's a very delicate balance between, how do you punish a person, how do you reinforce them, and whatever succeeds, you basically can never actually know.
Yeah.
You can posthumously analyze why some games succeeded. So
It's a crapshoot.
yeah, but basically the Candy Crush game, I think it was founded by some folks who majored in psychology, and they didn't know what game to do. But they kind of collected a few of these building blocks of how to reinforce, and then they basically built some game based on it and kind of succeeded. So I think that what they had initially was a very, very right direction. So it was a scientifically approached game. It wasn't just, a period. It was designed very carefully.
Can you go to the scale where you go from not at all to neutral to extreme? Yeah, not quite. I think the next one. Or it was the self-assessment page.
Oh,
There we go.
yeah.
Why? So, these scales, are they considered to be good scales? I mean, obviously, how socially restricted do you feel? You're going to talk about your context. But even the labels, not at all, neutral, extreme, I always see this neutral in the middle. And I feel like neutral is not between not at all and extreme. In fact, I would say not at all is neutral. And because how socially rejected do you feel? And I think that scale would be on the extremely socially rejected to extremely socially accepted. And neutral would be like, I'm just kind of like, no one's looking at me, but like, it's okay, no problem.
I'm gonna change this on my slide for next time. I just made this up as an example. This isn't actually part of any real scale,
Okay.
but certainly there are really bad scales out there that have been published, and
I would
People-
just delete neutral.
yeah, deal, it's done.
And swap the axis. I think it's better to on the right to have something positive and on the left to have something negative. Because
Is it?
So the
yeah, from the
I
dimension
think
how
so should be, yeah, so.
on Android and iOS, the affirmative action is now on the right.
Right,
Now,
right.
because it's
I
considered
have a
more
Windows
positive.
phone.
no, but
I think Windows Phone is on the top though, so it cancels on the bottom, right? Doesn't really matter.
I don't know.
yeah, so you usually
The right side is
the
more.
right side is kind of positive. So this is kind of it confuses people. So like you
That is actually, I should tell my boss that, because like everything we do is this way. And that would be really interesting if we look at data from like a decade ago and data now.
Let's see if people,
Yeah.
actually bias.
unless you are doing this for people who speak Hebrew or Arabic or stuff.
So I think this would skew you right.
There was actually an experiment where there was a diet pill or something, and they had a before and after picture, and it was not doing well. And once they swapped the location of it, like it was the before was on the right, and the after was on the left. When once we swapped it, immediately sorted. So it makes sense.
Yeah, no, I just like, we'll counterbalance images and things like that, but I never thought of counterbalancing the scale. I've never heard of anyone doing that. That's really interesting.
You have to do another PhD.
Somebody did a study, I'm sure.
Not for me, thanks. So I want to hear about what you all are working on, because I've talked about this lots in my life.
I had one other quick question.
Okay.
Out of the two games that you showed, how many people adopted?
We never released any of them. I was purely going grant funding and wrote up exactly how we were going to make everything and all the impact measures and everything like that. So I didn't quite get that far.
So,
I would guess very few.
but during the process of development, what were people who were involved? Users and beta testers?
We didn't have I had friends beta test it, and we all decided that none of them were fun.
Okay.
And I was like, I'm not going to show this to any user if I'm not confident in it, right? And we did get further with the marketing. People love the idea. Like parents love the idea to be able to buy something to help their kids be emotionally healthy.
Mm.
I wish I could have actually created that. So if any of you all have an idea for how to do that, I want to be involved.
Maybe we could talk.
Okay. Excellent.
Is there anybody who is tracking whether people unprompted, without any coercion, do they get attached to some of these tools? Is there anyone tracking things like that?
I don't think so. Is there a way to track that?
Should be, right?
What, you mean across apps?
In the sense that if something is empowering me as an individual, there is an arguable hypothesis that I'm getting attached to it, I'm getting dependent on it. Those are interesting, right?
Some of the, before Zanga went down the toilet,
Right.
they had a lot of interesting studies about basically user retention. And once their lead game developer left, he decided to kind of publish more about his thoughts. Like, this was what life was like in Zanga in the good old days. And he'd say, you would look at how basically their goal was get people to spend more time and buy more things, but ultimately that was because they were happier and more invested in it. Well, more invested in it.
I applied for a job there because they wanted to actually, I was like, you guys actually need to measure how happy people are. Them spending more time there doesn't mean they're more happy. Didn't get it.
It's okay. They're nothing else.
Right?
Not-
It works
not
out.
anymore, so that would have been that.
It was
So
good
that
practice.
has-
Time to join
Yeah.
that.
Right.
You would have been back to your PhD.
Yep.
I mean, they capture. I'm not sure. Yeah, it's kind of a question. If you can identify whether or not a game is making someone happy, like based on their usage statistics, like you'd be rich.
I'll work on that. I feel like people aren't collecting the right data currently.
It's complex. They don't know how.
You're right.
Because you were talking about like asking us like why does a computer scientist speak to the language, and our language is like time screen is on, time
Yeah.
screen goes off,
Yeah.
duration, from open app. I look at my log files and say open now, closed here, open here, closed here. Let me add up all those times and tell my boss, hey, usage is up. The boss is like, good job.
Yeah.
I think there's also a big component of like making games addictive is basically a person who's playing a game, in the background he realizes that right now he's playing a game. He's not advancing his life, he's not doing something useful. And people around him will look at him and give him this kind of looks, okay, you're spending this on all this time, and it kind of nags him in the background. So if there was a mechanism that said, like, while you're playing a game, you're actually doing something good for your own life. For example, even not changing the game at all, but releasing this article saying that people who play 24, they calculating better, faster. And once it's kind of out there, it removes this nagging sensation that can advance the game like very much.
I mean, that's a little bit, I think, how Lumosity has done so well. Like, people were like, oh my god, this is good for me, and now there's all this data suggesting it may not be. It kind of depends.
Yeah, but Lumosity is not like about games. It's about training the.
Yeah.
They are games. There are a bunch of mini games.
It's-
Yeah, but
like
the games
this.
was specifically designed. That was initially the purpose of improving your cognitive abilities. So there are much less requirements on the game itself, because you kind of initially start playing because you want to do something in your life.
Do you remember the game WarioWare? WarioWare? Perhaps not.
No.
But it's basically a game of mini games, and it was one of the more successful, like, back in the day, where it's like, oh, the kids are all getting ADD, they can only play
So like
each mini game for 30 seconds until it ends.
Is that like Mario Party?
It was like Mario. It was like Mario Party. Basically, some guy played Mario Party a lot and said, "I want this on, like the internet, basically." And started off on the Game Boys and whatever. So they hired Lumosity hired one of the chief game designers from WarioWare because it was like basically they're trying to do the same thing, like mini games. And so they hired this guy who's like really good at making mini games to make their mini games and put a psychology spin on it. So that would be.
Your comment earlier about having to like take a break when you die, though, that Lumosity, but Lumosity is making like a younger kids game where it's more continuous, like you play the mini games within kind of a story. So they're trying to get rid of that because of they lose people every time they have to reload the page.
Yeah.
And they've noticed that. They're trying to fix it.
Mario Party for happy kids. Mario smiling.
I would play that. Other thoughts? Anybody want to talk about what they're doing? Does anybody do any game stuff?
Well, I work in at SAP. We do this enterprise software, and we have a division or thought about the gaming at enterprise. Some people also do some crazy things, but usually the gaming in our enterprise scenario is giving them points, creating leadership boards, creating some kind of a peer, what you call peer pressure, and also peer, support. So that kind of games is what they do.
It's like kind of gamified within a work.
Yeah, and even simple things we do is people write a blog or write about anything, then we do two things. One is number of views, and then the rating, both. So these two, if you put them, it's significantly motivating, one side, plus also people start using it to justify their time spent on those. So there are two dimensions to it. That's an interesting part. But there are some weird ideas, but I don't think it will work. For example, in a big corporation, if you have a purchase order, now you want to close it. So you are a desk job guy who is always working. The challenge these days is the baby boomers who are working for so long at the desk are moving out of workforce, and we have the new kids coming in. They are used to Facebook, Twitter, this kind of stuff. So we are building applications that are little more that kind of friendly. They put counters, usually, always counters to measure, okay, I have 100 in box. They start actually with a dashboard, a number. Okay, I come to the office, I see 100 purchase orders to approve. Okay. That's dashboard. As you finish, the dashboard reduces, and that kind of a gaming, a little bit of numerical gaming. In olden days, you never had a metric. There was no dashboard at all. Right? So you start by looking at list, you start working each one off, but there is no number, the difficulty, the stuff like that. They're doing something, but not to this level where the goal was not to make them really happy, or they're not there yet. I think it's a nice idea to incorporate. Why not? Happy employees are more productive.
Yeah.
So that's a dimension we still have to think. It's new.
I know, that would be really cool to just like not explicitly make a game or activity that you have to play in addition to everything else you do in your life, but to kind of like weave it into things people already have to do.
The boring things that you do at your work, you make it a little more fun. So
Yeah.
that's thought, it's thinking. Not there yet, but that's a new. As I think it's easy now than ever before, because there's a huge change in the generation, right? And the decision is not done by the back office people anymore. It's done by the end users these days. So it's a compelling case. It's an interesting thing too.
And the growing consumerization of IT,
Yeah,
where a lot of it's driven by the end
it's a
user.
cloud-based.
Business unit side rather than the IT is
Yeah.
making all the decisions.
So that's an interesting thought.
An idea of how to bring gamification to the corporate world. So many times people have a bunch of emails in their inbox, and it kind of, you have to process them, answer them, and kind of difficult. So what if, you represent every email as like a puzzle piece, and you try to combine a puzzle, and if you're like stuck in, so you have to answer, basically handle a specific email that people will turn into a proper piece or something, and then you both have this gratification of building this puzzle of maybe complete emails, and then you also do, so it's not as difficult, you don't treat it as a chore, but as some kind of.
I think you're on the right track. Yeah.
Be cool.
Now you have to build it. No, I sort of that.
That's
It's a
actually
email API now.
an interesting problem. That's actually an interesting problem is I used to manage a project, and one of the biggest problem was, especially in big offices, they forget the overall goals of why they are paid, but then they see the mails coming into the inbox, they keep replying. So some guy just sends an email and just put a date, do it by this date. They try to meet that. They just don't think whether this mail, answering the mail and putting the energy, actually going to meet my objective, and can I go and report to my manager that I did a work related to it. They just ignore. So it's really interesting that they get a false satisfaction
but they show that there's a Pavlovian response to like getting a notification on your mobile device that you got another message and email and stuff. And so it's almost inbred in people's human psychology, human response, just to respond. Because they go, oh, the cost of it is what, 30 seconds a minute? I can do that, you know, and there's an addictive quality of sort of responding to it.
And they constantly get interrupted, especially developers. They get.
Oh, well, you got to shut that off as a developer.
That's what we did. Is no mails for some time, some groups. So that's a false gamification effect, I guess, where you get bad incentive, whereas. So there may be an opportunity to build something.
I think I heard about some kind of app you can install that like it doesn't let your emails in until a certain time of day, so then you have to just like deal with them for that hour or whatever, and then you can't anymore, which seems I should do that.
There's a team in Reuters which is actually trying to figure out how to measure the amount of caffeine that the traders on the stock exchange floor are consuming and how that is linked to some of the decisions that they're taking. I don't think they're going anywhere with it. I used to work with these guys earlier, but it's an interesting task, just to see what happens. If it doesn't work for caffeine, maybe they'll try and try cocaine the previous evening.
There was a study made about judges who were reviewing parole applications for prisoners, and so the work day, they come in the morning, they review several cases, then they have the afternoon break, they eat a meal, and then they review several more cases. So they found that the cases in the morning, the first 3 cases, they have the most chances of being accepted, then it goes down. After the lunch, another couple of cases have a good chance of being accepted, and goes down. So
It's basically you want the surgeon in the morning, not after 5.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Human nature.
Well, no, you want the surgeon in the late morning. The surgeon in the early morning is still on the night shift.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure I saw somebody present a study on the Monday effect. So police officers were doing something wrong on Mondays. They were making too many arrests or something because they weren't being careful. I forget what that was about, but that's another one of those you have to get a lot of data.
100% true.
Yeah.
It's not even even police officers validate that.
Really?
Yeah.
Awesome. Is that
well, especially with violations and stuff, there is a good amount that follow the policy where I just want to get it over with as fast as possible. So there you have some semicolon or whatever they have to do. And a good amount would be okay, first week, get it all done. Weeks 3 to 4, I sleep in my car.
yeah.
You did your research, you see actually how you can intervene and make people not fall in the lower but go to other band. But the question is it simply the behavioral or the interventions that you are talking about, or is there something to do with the chemicals, the imbalance in the brain where you need a pill for that? Or is it actually doable without the pill?
I mean, that everyone will debate both sides of that argument. I'm a big fan of not taking medication.
Okay. But are there enough?
There's a lot of studies that say therapy plus medication is the best choice. One of the things that I feel like I learned in my PhD is that exercise, sleep, and nutrition are more effective than pretty much any psychotherapeutic intervention. So it's why are we even spending our time? I'm a little bit disillusioned towards the end of the PhD, so forgive me. But why are we even spending our time trying to develop these things? Yes, they're helpful once you have these other things met, but if everybody just ate better and exercised, a few days a week.
Are you saying I would get better results if I went to a gym than if I played the game for half an hour?
I can almost guarantee it. Don't you think? Doesn't that seem right? For you, even for your mental health.
Go to the gym and stop paying so many gyms.
Yeah.
Well, it's kind of that old adage, right? Instead of changing someone's mind, you change their mood, and that kind of changes it.
And like exercise changes your physiology, and so the things that we try to do in our research lab is change people's physiology. But like we know that running on the treadmill for 15 minutes does that. Why not just tell them to do that?
Right.
So, yeah.
James would love you.
yeah, right. I should switch careers.
I don't know. I'm relatively super unhappy if I have to go to a gym.
I mean,
All the unhappiness in one 30-minute bucket.
but are you happier afterwards? Like, we need to do like
It's over.
multiple tests.
Yeah, I'm really happy it's over. Yeah, that's why. Yeah.
You mean you're glad that it's over?
Yeah, my baseline, like compared to everything else, the gym is like here. Any form non-gaming competitive exercise is like on the bottom.
What about some other kind of physical activity? Like something
Okay,
you...
if I do sports, it's fine.
There you go.
But gym is like,
So, I mean, that's why that plan hasn't worked either for a lot of people.
Another idea. You know how you, when you watch like a YouTube video, sometimes you have this kind of commercial that you have to watch for 5 seconds or for 30 seconds. And it's basically it's forced on you, and you kind of waiting for it to end, and you're annoyed that you even watching this, and so basically you connect your negative emotions to that specific product or whatever that they are advertising. So what if instead of just waiting for the 30 seconds, you had this like small puzzle in the corner that if you like make it, then the commercial stops. So like you both, you kind of feel concentrated on the puzzle, but you do still hear the commercial, and you connect your positive emotion that you completed the puzzle in such a short time with the content of the commercial.
Something like that should be like combined with an ad blocker. You're like,
Yeah.
all right, like I'll like sort of watch the ad, but like
So
you
you're
get something
basically
out of
not
it.
even mad that you're being shown a commercial because you have a chance to solve a puzzle.
Yeah, you're distracted essentially.
We do some of that now where you have to fill out a survey question or something in order to continue. It's not really a commercial.
It's horrible.
Yeah, it's
I
horrible.
understand. I understand.
it's worse than a commercial.
I think so
Pandora does that, actually. Yeah, so Pandora has an option whenever it stops you for an ad and you say no ads for 3 hours, like
Okay.
play this little game. And it's like always gonna be like, click on the Domino's pizza like 30
Wow.
times. But some of them are actually kind of fun.
Right.
So there was one that I don't exactly remember what it was, but I actually found it again on their website. They're like, do you want to play this ad again? Yes. Yes, I do. I messed up last time. I could have done better.
That's awesome.
But then you kind of have conflicted feelings because
Yeah.
the game itself is also an advertisement for the pizza or Domino's.
Yeah.
But if you want to keep pure puzzle, or like small Sudoku or something.
There was some research that another psychology buddy of mine was doing on ways of basically like captchas that people don't hate. So like captchas are trying to identify like that you're a human. So I always like text that's like messed up basically, and they're like, well, it doesn't really generate much revenue for the site. It does generate a little revenue. So like, why not? So they're doing things like there's a big picture of a sports game, and they're like, click on the soccer ball. And you're like, oh, okay. Like, that's actually kind of difficult for soccer ball and football and another soccer ball. And like, click on the second biggest soccer ball or whatever. It's easy for humans, really hard for computers.
Right.
And like, what the soccer ball has a big Adidas sign on it. Then Adidas is happy because you just clicked on the Adidas logo.
Like where's Waldo?
Yeah, it's like where's Waldo, but like with profitability.
Yeah.
So they're doing stuff like that that were shown to be pretty. Well, I actually enjoyed doing that. So those that I think is way better than captures. So what should we be doing? So obviously there are lots of things that you thought about in your thesis process. What should we do since we are outside of the field? What should we do?
Yeah. What would you like
God,
communities like us?
Incorporate into our products, incorporate into our lives.
I'm really a big fan of this positive computing movement that's happening. I think actually originating out of Australia, where they're trying to like integrate positive psychology into everything, like Facebook, Google, everything that already exists, so people don't even have to do anything. And figuring out how to do that is going to be totally product specific. But if you can make something that's not only doing the thing it says, but also improving well-being, then that's pretty awesome. Do that.
By the way, Google
All right.
something about Google captures. They're kind of cheating a little bit. So if you've noticed, a capture is usually consists of some kind of a synthesized image and then a real crop of a real image. So like a house number or something. And you have to enter the whole capture. So as it turns out, you only have to get right the first part. The second part you can make a mistake. So basically what they're doing is the first part is they know what they synthesized and you have to enter this code. And the second part, they're actually using crowdsourcing in this way to help them figure out what is in the image. So they're using our brains to interpret this information. So they are using us for image recognition, basically.
That's smart.
So you can even ignore the second part, write whatever you want, mess up their algorithms, whatever.
Well, it has a voting, so
Yeah,
it's only accepted if they
nature, yeah.
agree there.
If
Agree there the same.
if not all people are doing it, that's fine.
I don't know if this exists already, but somebody should make a crowdsourced search engine, because Google doesn't give that great of results. But if people have people rank up things to the top, then we can stop getting such crappy things at the top of the search.
So they actually did that for images. So most of Google's image search algorithms were actually based on this big, what was it, image tagger or something, whatever. So basically, there's this there's a little game playing with your buddy, and you get both shown the same image. You have to type in keywords that you think are appropriate for the image: blue, mountain, forest, ranch, van, whatever. And whatever that you both enter, you get points for. And so, you and your buddy are sitting there being like, nice, we're going to get points. And so if you get 4 points for a picture, that means you got 4 words. Actually, you got more points for more rare words. So blue gets you 1 point, mountain gets you 2 points, Appalachians gets you 4 points, and like Uncle Tom's cabin in the on this is the address gets you like 50 points.
And so it's crowdsourced categorization of images?
Yeah.
Did they crowdsource sort of like the popularity of images, or like how do they determine what goes at the top of the list?
So that's, I don't exactly know. I imagine I know like whenever you click on an image to make it bigger, they record that and that image gets pushed up higher.
Okay. That's about right.
There's some other magic going on. They have money to
They do.
But the humans are actually very good at doing this, at the image tagging. So I did that for a little while, and I was getting like 100 points per week or something, and some people were getting thousands of points per week. And if you got over 1,000 points, like every 1,000 points you got like a Google Wallet dollar, basically.
I know Duolingo is doing something.
Duolingo is made by the same guy that did CAPTCHAs.
Okay.
So reCAPTCHA was the commercialization project of the CAPTCHA project, which was run by a guy named Louis von Ahn, who also started Duolingo. And Duolingo is literally the same as CAPTCHAs, except with translation. So whenever you're on Duolingo, after you reach the level 3, anything that you're translating is actually old classic books that are in Spanish or English. You're trying to, whatever language you're trying to use, you're trying to convert them.
I heard they were doing that, and I couldn't figure, I played on there and I couldn't figure out what they were doing.
Yeah, Project Gutenberg is actually their primary sponsor, and so they're doing, they basically translated hundreds of books, actually, full books from Duolingo.
It could be actually good for like Google Glass and during driving, so you basically stuck with them behind the wheel, so you can spend this time, how to translate because you don't have anything better to do. You can.
It's
your auditory kind of system is available, but your visual is not as much. So you can
Duolingo just raised $35 million.
That site is awesome.
It's awesome, yeah.
I love that site.
Practice German with that.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tchiki. Thank you so much for
Yeah.
coming.
Thank you guys all for coming. Can I get all of your contact information so you don't just disappear into the nether